Me today in the studio with Ndug Rugarama, the man responsible for the Pan-African issues in Uganda, the Uganda chapter of the Pan-African movement. Ndug Rugarama, you are welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Comrade Mtuta. Good morning to our dear viewers, wherever you may be watching us from. And I take the opportunity also to thank the management of UBC for affording us this opportunity every Friday.
You are going to use them. You are also going to use them. Merry Christmas.
Ah,
I don't know what that means in the African perspective.
this Christmas thing is also
A creation is a concoction of many things.
But nevertheless,
that's a discussion for another day.
Absolutely.
Now, we are here today looking at a number of issues that concern the African continent, and we are very pleased knowing that at least someone is following us out there, and of course we'll be very grateful to hear what you people sometimes also think. We are not the biggest experts on Pan-African issues or African issues. I know many people have a lot of things that we can share as the people of the continent of Africa. Today we'll be looking at a number of issues, including, we're not limited to your heads of state of Africa being in the United States and meeting with the President of the United States of America, and also a number of other issues. But before we go into that, we need to look at the week, how it has been from the time we parted last week. And last week we were looking at again a number of interesting issues on the continent, and looking at how Africa needs to position itself, especially in this global courting. You have China on one end, you have US on another end. There was also recently, the other time they were also meeting with the Russian president before, I think, the outbreak of the war, moments after that. So what is Africa looking for in all of this, and what that we stand to benefit if we are to make this, to make use of all these coatings? But I think there's a lot that can be looked at in that perspective. And Rugarama, I just want to whip into your week in the African context. How has it been? Of course, I know you are starting with the football. I was looking at this guys, and I'm like, what are you talking about, this football thing?
yes, truth be told, football, of course, the World Cup now in Qatar is something that almost everybody is talking about. That is in the world of football now, and the world of football is almost everybody's interest, because it goes beyond the sport
Sure.
part of it. And we talk about so many other things. We talk about the economics of we talk about the politics of the game, the economics involved in the game. And so it's a whole full package that looking at, of course, there were politics behind Morocco being an African country and going all the way to the semi-finals, and arguments that actually it was not African enough. But the statements attributed to their coach were very beautiful. He left no stone unturned about his Pan-African credentials.
Sure.
And wishing that whatever he was achieving for himself and for the team and the country.
Did he have to explain that?
For him, he was actually talking from the heart. It is not that he was pushed against the wall, but whenever they would bring individual players, you would see about two of them, including their captain. You would see that they were not up to the speed. They were not tuned to. You could critique their Pan-African credentials. They were looking at it from the Arab point of view. Nobody is denying that they are Arabs. Then they were looking at it from the Moroccan point of view, something like that. So anyhow, even the press also didn't help matters, because they tried as much as humanly possible not to align the Moroccan victories, successive victories, to the African continent. But that notwithstanding, even their last encounter with France, I have joked before, and probably joke is more serious this time. I think everybody will agree with me that they are more African than they are French. So yes, the world of football, we are now into the semis.
So how many African teams are we left with, starting with
There
France?
is France. Of course, Argentina is not, you know what they did historically.
Yeah.
They systematically eliminated the black community because you would be worried. You can ask yourself as to how come that we have got a high percentage of dark-colored people in South Brazil, and
yes,
we almost have zero, actually zero, in Argentina, which is just
a neighbor,
a foot across. So their racial segregation and their racial biased history is very well documented for those who are interested in it, and I can't say from the Pan-African point of view that I support Argentina, but if they can scribble anything from the history, Messi going, I think this being his probably last World Cup, it will be their victory. But I would wish that going forward that we can have France go through. Now, that is as far as the part of football is concerned. But comrade, there is something else also. I don't know if you have seen what I have seen. Away from what is happening in the United States of America, our brother KD invited me for a Pan-African debate on one of the Washington radios, and the participation was revolving around the function of time and again African leaders being summoned. Did I say that? Yes, being summoned by powers like America, China, Russia, and then they call it that they are talking business.
Thank God they were not put on a bus, but
more or less, whether you go with your plane or whatever it is, but at the end of the day. But we are now glad that this time around, I believe wisdom is going to prevail over the African leaders to take advantage of the rift that is existing between majorly the NATO countries headed by America and then Russia with her allies, who are not necessarily coming out to say we are allies, but we can clearly see that they are allies. Now they seem to be fighting for Africa, and I think it is high time that we utilize this opportunity to carry our agenda forward. I want to believe that we have got an agenda because we have got institutions that in which our agenda is very well embedded, and through those institutions we articulate it.
That is a point to me. We are seeing these heads of Africa in the US. You remember at one point they also had a meeting with Russia. And soon, sometime later, next year, I think there will be another engagement with China. Now, do you see these African heads of state pushing for something common for Africa?
Yes, I do. I do. Why? Like I said, you see, we have got what unites us as Africans, especially the Africans on the African continent. We've got institutions now, like the African Union, and through the African Union we have got the Agenda 2063, and we know what it espouses. So all our efforts when we move to such meetings of that nature, they are not meetings whereby we are going to be discussing about the interests of Uganda in isolation of the interests of the African continent or the neighboring countries, if you like. And when we talk about peace and security, for instance, it will not be peace and security in one part of Africa, but it will be peace and security on the African continent.
Yeah, because why I'm saying so, what is a man like Ramaphosa with his now problems back at home thinking? What is a man like my friend Biya with the problems of Cameroon, with the increasing poverty back at home and the insecurity and the, I mean, he is a visiting head of state whenever he comes back to his home. What about, so when you look about what's happening in Mali, what's happening in Nigeria, with these accumulating problems back at home, are these heads of state in the right frame of mind to sit down and look at the bigger picture of Africa? Which I mean should be the case we are looking at, but is that even possible?
You see, Comrade Mututa, what is very fundamental here is that when we talk about problems, we seem to associate problems with the African continent, and we forget that problems actually are everywhere. They may not be in the same magnitude. They may not be the same in texture. But the truth of the matter is that there are problems, for instance, in Greece. Greece, for a very number of years now, going forward, has been the odd man out of the European Union. But the European Union has not come out to say we are expelling you from the Union simply because you have constantly failed to meet certain targets upon which we have constantly advanced you loans. You know, German, specifically German, has been giving lots of money to Greece. But the Greeks have not gotten their economy back on the right footing. Now, what I'm trying to say is not to justify that because a country like Greece and some other probably countries, a few of them on the European continent and some in Asia, are not getting it right yet, and therefore it is okay for African countries to not to aspire to be better. No, this is not what I'm saying. I'm simply saying that, look, the problems are everywhere. They may not be of the same magnitude. They may not be the same in texture, but they are also there. And they should be looked at so that we do not demonize what happens on the African continent. That notwithstanding, your point is very clear. You're saying, yes, we have got countries and we can point them out and we say, okay, our uncle, Your Excellency Paul Biya, your Cameroon, the Ambozodia is like a part of not being part of Cameroon for a very long time, and yet you are the leader, and we can as well say yes, we have had the president of DRC, but there are some parts of Democratic Republic of Congo that probably the Tshisekedi, His Excellency Tshisekedi, has not even visited in his number of years that he has stayed as a president. And might never visit in his life. Absolutely. Yes. And we are saying, not only that, you see, when you cast, you throw your roving eye around the African continent, you look at people who have not even been invited. You know what happened with our brother, the professor who was overthrown in this West African country not long ago, and one of the generals, his former AD, took over. Yeah, because for me that is actually what you are raising is another great point. There are those heads of state, number of them, many of them, Uganda of course inclusive. You remember when some people were saying even the President Museveni should not be invited. We shall talk about that later. But what about this who are not invited? Do they present the best credentials of Africa? No, there are some situations really where it is very clear that even when we are having our own challenges as a continent, but the continent has spoken. If, for instance, we are saying that you carried out a coup, and the regional bodies, ECOWAS, for instance, and African Union, and this is the mother, has put sanctions on you. Now, you really, America, where do you get the audacity of inviting such a man whose regulatory body on the African continent has sanctioned and said, no, we are not interested in your presence. You don't sit with us when we have meetings as
heads of state,
heads
yes.
of state in Addis Ababa. You don't sit with us when we have our meeting in ECOWAS, and therefore it would know, even at the elementary level of diplomacy, it would not be proper for the head of state of America to say, we are not, for us, we are inviting you. Likewise, we have had, and this is the unfortunate bit of it, I think, where the opposition parties in their respective African countries have had to petition some of the powers that be, the foreign powers, to say, look, cut aid or to our country. Don't entertain our president, don't even invite him. But you see, the interests, and probably as our politicians mature, you see, learning never stops.
Sure.
So when I talk about maturity, I don't want to be mistaken that our opposition politicians are not mature. No. What I'm saying is that even those who are in government, they are also learning. Even those who are in opposition, they are also learning. Now, learning never stops, and like Professor Mbiti says, even in death we learn. Now, I want to say, therefore, in that respect, that the opposition politicians on the African continent, mainly, who have been shouting about some of their sitting presidents not being invited to America or Europe, and they petition European Parliament,
sure,
and you know, that kind of stuff. But you see, now they are learning, because there are some presidents, they had petitioned those bodies and the president that we should not be invited. But they have been invited, and they are there. Meaning, therefore, that the interests of some of these other countries are much bigger than the bickering within the individual countries.
Yeah, because then that would have been, talking about learning, should have been a lesson to many of our opposition leaders in Africa, including Uganda, of course. I'm saying including Uganda, because there were also efforts with some of the politicians in Uganda saying that President Museveni shouldn't be invited because they are raising a number of issues, human rights issues. And of course, you know, when some of these Western countries, when they want to make you look bad, they begin with the human rights. They say Uganda record of human rights. But when you definitely consider the human rights records or record of US, and you compare to Uganda, you can be surprised.
I can tell you on very good record that unless, of course, we apply different standard measures of human rights
exactly,
to different countries. The American society, the American leadership, as history has carried the various leaderships, and as we have come to know them, I cannot pretend to say that they have got any human rights record to write home about. Their human rights record has been punctuated and characterized by racial segregation, by discrimination in the housing sector, discrimination in the health insurance sector, discrimination in police and other security agencies recruitment, training, the discrimination in education, and the apparent security concerns whereby which are also racially engineered, and the state looks on. The I can't breathe is an everyday occurrence. The so-called white supremacy, whereby these people who call themselves whites pick guns, because the gun law or laws regulating guns is, in my opinion, really very shambolic. Move to populated places where blacks are and shoot them. Then when you look at the trials that come thereafter, they are also questionable.
Yeah, because that is very key when you come to that. Now, people and the viewer out there, know, many of us know, and some of you also know, that actually when we talk of the human rights issues in Uganda, for example, or Africa generally, you realize that this, and we are not even denying that we have issues.
No, we are not. You see, and that is why, Comrade Mututa, that's why the population should understand us. So when we say the human rights record of America is shambolic, and we go ahead to point out, because recently there were statistics which are being made that on average every day in America, they are about 5 to 8, that is a week I think, 5 to 8 shootings, you know, mass shootings. Now, if, for instance, they asked me this time, not in my unguarded moments, in very guarded moments, I would tell you, they asked me a question as to which country is most chaotic, where we wouldn't want to say to visit unless certain measures are put in place. I would say I don't want to go to America because I'm not sure whether I'm going to live. You go to a supermarket, you don't know which racially charged man is going to come with a gun and end your life. You see? So, truth be told, by mentioning that there are very serious challenges with the human rights record in countries like America and other jurisdictions, we are not saying that the few that we have or the many, depending on the part of the fence you are sitting on, and being very honest, is okay. No. We are not saying that if, for instance, public rallies here of the opposition parties are supposed under the law to be conducted and they are not conducted, they are brutally disrupted, it is fine. No, it is not fine. We are not saying that they are allowing, for instance, because there are even basic things, by the way, I mean fundamental things, not just basic fundamental things, that we can have a population in part of Uganda, in Karamoja, dying of hunger. Where is the fundamental human right to food? You see? That there are situations whereby our mothers, for instance, who are moving into hospitals to give birth, end up dying simply because we do not have the health facilities to be able to have our mothers and sisters deliver properly. We are talking about the ever-increasing presence of registering high percentages of death as a consequence of malaria. Why should we be talking about malaria in this year, 2022, going into 2023? You see, so some of these things, therefore, that you are not sure, you fall sick, that you are not going to die.
But even then, even beyond that, the basics we are looking at, even at the democratic level, African leaders have been accused of nepotism, of tribalism, and we are not even seeing those things don't exist. But you look at, again, when you go back, unfortunately, we may have to refer to US again for this particular one, a sitting government, a sitting president who wanted to overthrow his own government.
Comrade Trump.
Yes, for purposes saying that the elections had been rigged. How can you, as a sitting president, preside over an election which is also rigged? But even beyond that, if you can behave to that level that you can have people walk in the capital and cause all the mayhem and the chaos that you saw. Now, if you reversed that action and you placed it in any of the African continent, the condemnation that would have come from elsewhere would have been massive.
There is what we call, there is an English word called hypocrisy. Now, if you want to understand it without wasting a lot of time turning the pages of Advanced Learner's dictionary, you have to look at some of these so-called utopian democracies like America. Because I can assure you that if, for instance, what happened when the Capitol Hill was invaded by the protesters, what happened anywhere on the African continent, or in other jurisdictions, by the way, not necessarily African continent. Like, for instance, they had intended that it happens in Venezuela. If it had happened elsewhere and not in America, the media, which of course is an extension of the intelligence system of those powers, would have been awash with descriptions of such episodes in as the dictator of country X has been invaded by the masses who are looking for genuine democracy. But it never happens in the kind of democracies, in their opinion, which they think are standard measures.
They would even have gone ahead and justified the rigging of the election. But when you look at all this, and for the few who is following us, we are not saying that Africa is immune and doesn't have these issues, because we also have leaders in Africa who have made leadership a property. And we have had a number of issues in the African continent, a number of countries in Africa that are still crippling with that. But we are looking at the standard when we are defining these human rights, when we are looking at these democratic credentials, that all countries in the world are crippling to measure up to a particular standard of this democratic advancement. But that does not come from out. It has to come from within. So that, in fact, when even we talk about the constitutions in schools, wherever we have been told the American Constitution of over 400 years is the longest constitution that has never been changed. Recently, President Trump made a statement, said if he wins back at this election, which is coming next year, he is going to change the constitution so that he can allow members of Congress limited terms. What does that mean?
You see, the other thing which I want to share with our viewers here is that I think it is the highest level of pretense to talk about constitutions not being changed. Maybe the appropriate word here is amendment. Unless, of course, it is an entrenched, article whereby it is such that it cannot be amended. The moment it is not done that way, and that's where we have got problems. By the way, we are having problems here in Uganda, whereby we said, but why did you change article? Is it 105?
5, yeah.
And the question was it made in such a way that it could not be changed? Because now changing is the word, but the appropriate word there would be amended. Was it put there in such a manner that it would not be amended? Of course, the conventional wisdom and good manners would tell you that there are certain things really which you should not just rush to amend. You can see that a parliament is rushing to amend a certain article simply because of certain selfish interests. At the level of academic debate, we can have that. But truth be told, that if you have not guarded the certain article by way of entrenchment, trust me, it is going to be like we said to Jukwateko, they are going to touch it. And when they touch it, they will touch it within the law. And whatever will be done within the law. Now, there are certain constitutions, like they say the British Constitution is not written, but it is highly respected. When you consistently follow what happens in Britain, when you consistently follow what happens in America, the levels of hypocrisy, double standards, and for them, by the way, they are not just undemocratic at their own level and and they leave it at that. They export their undemocratic tendencies to the rest of the world. Because, you see, we were here talking about former President Trump having supported and engineered what would have
the insurrection
culminated into an insurrection or overthrow. We wanted maybe to the masses to capture the state and maybe reinstate him or whatever his plan was. But the truth of the matter is they do not stop there. When you look at all the declassified intelligence reports, CIA, they will see how the American community, how the American state has consistently exported wars, carried out coups, economic, political, on the African continent, in Asia, installed puppets, and in cahoots with their cousins, Britain, France, and all sorts of things, using the IMF and World Bank, crippled economies. So there is much more that some of these pretentious utopian democracies have done, which if you do not use extra lenses, you are only going to limit yourself at looking at the undemocratic, so-called undemocratic tendencies that have resulted in bankrupting the African states and other countries in Asia, when in actual sense the bigger picture is that the big brothers are the ones who have continuously created an atmosphere whereby we cannot flourish. It is only those economies which have broken away, sometimes forcefully. Because I want to tell you that China, for instance, is where it is, not because of its European or Western, Europe and America, so-called applied democratic standards. No, China is where it is because it forcefully said we are going to have it our own way, and they are having it their own way. A blend of capitalism and socialism, and they call themselves the Socialistic Republic of. So whether you want to discredit them on their democratic credentials or not, they don't care. They are having it their way, and that is why the other time we were discussing and we said Africa must devise ways of making sure if we are building a hybrid, let us build a hybrid. There's nothing wrong with coping, as long as you are copying the right things and using them to the advantage of enriching your own people. It would be very okay. Or if we have failed because our organic the democratic progression was interfered with when the colonial master came into our continent. But even then, now that we are in a state in which we are, it does not stop us from borrowing, so that we create a beautiful hybrid of democracy which will be unique to us, and we use it as a platform to catapult ourselves socio-economically and otherwise.
And of course, that is why it takes us back to the our earlier question that as African leaders and of course now collect in the US, are they looking at what we are talking today? Are they looking at how to make Africa a greater continent? My only fear is when they begin, and we have seen this happen, of course, it will not be the first time and will not be surprised, where we find people trying to cut deals in terms of economics, say we want to supply this and you can give us this here, now that, which is also a good gesture, that among the things that have been done is the extension of AGOA, and whether we are benefiting from that, of course, is a different story. But we may also see people trying to, and of course I know America also want to say we could give you some supply of arms which are better than if you have been getting supplies from Russia, which has been the case in most of the African countries. But I think the most important thing is that what Africa needs to do is to look at itself from inside and build capacity. If you are not going to get money from World Bank, where are you going to get money from? If you are not going to get money funded from these other guys, the big brothers, where can you get alternative funding? Is China good enough, or China could also be a bloodsucker? So some of these things are the things that Africa needs to sit down and look at and discuss. And of course, for me, I would have been more comfortable having the represent. I know, of course, African Union was invited, but I have been more comfortable looking at a participation, a greater participation of the African Union, so that when these decisions are made, they again could trickle down in the respective states. But when you hear some of our heads of state, what they are, I think next week you'll see some of the drama and the things that you'll see what the African heads of state are going through in the US. But the bottom line is, where is Africa in this summit? Of course, I know America has an interest, and that's why they invited the African heads of state. But it would have be upon now the African heads of state to make use of that invitation, to know that as Africa we must survive and we shall need ABCD. So until that time, when we begin looking at issues on the African continent as Africans, and we sit down as Africans and we say, no, these guys, we need to ask them ABCD, which I know is happening, or it may not be happening. But away from that, we are back on the continent, and we have seen a lot that has been happening back at home, even as some of these leaders of heads of state in the US. You did talk about it, the issue of saying, look, the US should not invite a particular head of state because at home we too far. Now, I made a statement here the other day and said that even at the worst, at the extreme, that America or another agency or main government will stop giving money to an African country, say Uganda, the president of that country will not go hungry because the money has not been given to his country. Of course, the president will also see a lot of other sectors suffering, but he will not go hungry. But the people who will be suffering are the ordinary people. Those who will not get medicines when they go to the hospital. Those who will not be able to access any services when they need them. So the issue of saying, look, don't fund my government because my government is a dictator, I think that also indicates and shows the thing you talked about, not in age, but the political credentials in terms of maturity, how we seem to be looking at issues. Because at the end of it, the president is not going to be here. I'm giving an example for just President Museveni is not going to be a president of Uganda forever. But Uganda is going to remain Uganda. And the best way to have a good Uganda is to have the systems of Uganda working. If it's not working today, doesn't mean that when President Museveni goes, things will go with him. The government will be there. So I think as politicians, it's also good to look at the common good. We can disagree on a number of things, and I'm not saying that you need to agree on everything, but let's have some common good. Same. But this one, we need it. But this one, you're also wrong. And it can be understandable. Now, if that is not done, that internal debate, to me, is very key, especially for the African continent. When we come back from the break, we'll be looking at some of these issues and more, and we'll also be looking at exact issues that Africans need to look at, because sometimes we talk about only leaders. What about we, the ordinary people, after the break? Don't go away.
The Ministry of Health informs the public that there are confirmed cases of Ebola in Uganda. We, however, urge the public not to panic as the situation is being managed. The Ministry of Health further reminds the public to be on the lookout for any persons who may show signs and symptoms of Ebola. These include high body temperature, abdominal pains, diarrhea, vomiting, bleeding from the body openings such as the nose, eyes, and mouth. Please inform the nearest health worker immediately if you see anyone with these signs and symptoms. To prevent Ebola from spreading further, please take the following preventive measures: regular washing of hands with water and soap, avoid handshaking and hugging, avoiding any contact with any suspected Ebola patients. Any person who dies suddenly should not be buried but reported to the nearest health worker or LC1 immediately. For further information, please call the Ministry of Health toll-free number on 0800-100-066 or send a free SMS to your report on 8500. This message is from the Ministry of Health with support from UNICEF and World Health Organization.
It's better to foster respect instead of fear and pain.
Cause a good school equals a better life.
Raising voices. Get value for your money by choosing the right paint. With Global Paints, you don't just paint, but paint for generations to come. Make Global Paints a paint of choice and make your building a paradise. We have weathercoat emulsion, undercoat emulsion, silk vinyl emulsion, flat emulsion, super gloss and high gloss. Global Paint, a reliable product.
Get yourself a Zuku TV decoder and satellite dish today at a low price of only 105,000 Ugandan shillings. And the Zuku decoder at only 60,000 Ugandan shillings. And enjoy your favorite movies, series, kids entertainment, music, local and international news, and lots more. Enjoy amazing packages like Zuku Smart, Zuku Smart Plus, Zuku Classic, Zuku Premium, and Zuku Asia. Get connected today. Zuku, life got better.
It's our mission to secure your money.
Protecting your money is as important as earning it. It is for this reason that the Deposit Protection Fund of Uganda, DPF, was established by the government of Uganda to provide deposit protection to customers of regulated financial institutions. In the unlikely event that your commercial bank, credit institution or microfinance deposit-taking institution fails, the DPF will pay you up to 10 million Uganda shillings. Keep your personal information such as national identification number, mobile phone or an alternative bank account updated with your banker. Terms and conditions apply. For more information, contact DPF at Aha Towers, Plot 7 Lodell Road, Kampala. Call 0312 206 400 or visit our website at www.dpf.or.ug.
We are the DPF. We protect your money. Deposit Protection Fund of Uganda.
Yeah, welcome back again to this segment of the Pan-African Friday from Kampala here to UBC. Apparently, Kampala today was rainy, and it is still raining in some parts of the city. And for you, if you were out in the morning today and you missed the rain, you must have been the unluckiest. But I'm sure whoever was early by 7, 8 in the morning must have at least had some drops of rain on him or her before accessing town. The temperature was just about 17. It was a bit cold, but I'm told by the end of the day it will be around 28, which will be okay for Kampala. And that is the beauty of Uganda. Now, when we went off for the break, we were talking about the internal democracies and internal debates within Africa. What Africa needs to be talking now, so that in the future we can have a stronger democracy on the continent, or within the small countries or the small political parties, establishments, we must have a debate. And someone will fault me on that, saying, particularly in Uganda, there is no debate, which is not true. I can tell you, and for the viewers who have been following issues in this country, for me, I've been enjoying the debate between the Deputy Speaker and the Minister of Internal Affairs, Honorable Tafire. One saying, the parliament is too big. Another one saying, no, look, forget about the old guards, and this is a new dispensation. One saying, after all, Otafire himself is a product of the many, he's responsible for the many MPs of members of parliament, because he was moving from one area, cut another one for him, so that he can also come back to parliament. So for me, I think that such a discussion is healthy for people to be able to come up and critique themselves and from within. To me, that is something that I've been looking for in Uganda, and I'm happy it is happening now. And Ugandan leaders can sit down and critique themselves and criticize themselves, but at the same time also agree, because Otafire is saying, look, you have a very big parliament which is taking a lot of money from government, but you are talking of we don't have police. So which one is a priority? And the other people are saying no, but having a big parliament is not a problem. It is because the police is not doing its job. Then one is saying, how can they do a job when they are not facilitated? So I think you also have been following this debate. I will pick something from you before we continue to the rest of Africa.
Yes, surely I have keenly been following the politics, the debate in Uganda, and especially this particular one which I have just brought up. I would want to register the following concerns. One, of course, certainly Tayebwa is our generation, and the deputy, right honorable deputy speaker.
But don't you think this generation debate, this generation politics also dangerous?
I'm coming to that. First of all, is our age, and at the same time, is our friend. And General Kahindo Tafire, certainly these are our big uncles. They are the people who brought this revolution.
The son was saying, his son was saying, just give them some short time.
Yeah, they are in their evening, and you can say really this is our time.
Sure.
If you like.
Yeah, that's the same.
Like you really say, this is our time. But what do I want to register there? What I want to register there, and maybe to our viewers, I know of course very many people tune in to this UBC and particularly this program. What used to happen in NRA then was that if there was a contradiction from a senior member, like there appear to be contradictions within the statements that probably General has made, because it appears as if for security to prevail, there has got to be an increased number of police personnel. Maybe. But is it necessarily true? Can't we have a system whereby we increase security without necessarily having to increase the
numbers of
police
yes.
personnel. That's one. Then, two, is it, what is the correlation between the high members of parliament, numbers of members of parliament, and the few recruited police personnel? Is it therefore true that we have not had increased personnel in police because the parliament is ballooned? Now, maybe not, maybe yes. When therefore they appear to be such contradictions within a statement made by a senior party leader, what would happen is that there would be withdrawal from the public eye,
yes.
and then such matters would be discussed, and probably would not see the kind of what appears to be a clash. What is happening now is that Comrade Tayebwa is also saying, and there are no longer any guarded moments now, whereby he says, but look, the ballooned parliament you are talking about, you are a direct beneficiary, which is a fact.
True.
Then two, that it is not true that the police must increase the numbers in order for Uganda to have the kind of security and that you seem to be talking about. Now, all this may be correct, you see, but where is it being said from? Now, there appear to be a crack that has been created between the members of the same family. Now, it is not being helped. Nobody is seeing this crack by the public outbursts. When we get increased outbursts within the public from the members of the same family, then we are widening this crack. And I'm not sure that that one is helping build and progress the agenda within the NRM. What I read, therefore, going forward, is that if we continue on this political trajectory, we are going to have a clash. And this clash of not just, when we get the clash of opinions, then it means that we have forgotten the ideology around which NRM is built. Either NRM didn't have an ideology, and I doubt that, or people have become so selfish within the party that they no longer want to appeal to the ideology. It no longer serves them. Because...
But that seems to be coming out when the Deputy Speaker says that if there is any serious
increased prices are not going to be sorted out by talking about ideology.
Exactly.
Well,
because maybe there could also be a disconnect between reality, the ideology of reality.
The truth of the matter is, an ideology is not just an item that it is here, you can touch it, and then you put it in the pocket. But the correct ideology, and I'm very sure I do not take anything away from Right Honorable Deputy Speaker. I know he knows some of these things. But sometimes in our unguarded moments, certain statements are made.
Yeah, sure.
Not that they are necessarily correct or wrong, but probably we could have said them better than we have actually said them. The truth of the matter is that when you have got a correct approach to issues, clarity on ideology, some of these things like increasing prices of food, some of these things like unemployment are actually solved by having a correct approach. And the correct approach is a byproduct of a correct ideology.
Your friend, President Ramaphosa, is suffering from the same thing.
The politics within South Africa, for those who care to go to the archives and look at how the ANC has progressed over the years, you will appreciate the fact that we have got the high levels of maturity within the party. But there is no party, be it in Europe, be it in North America, that does not suffer certain setbacks. The ANC, for instance, like we have seen the Chama cha Mapinduzi, suffers certain setbacks. Although it has got guts, which is very different from what we have, for instance, in NRM.
Sure.
NRM, it is, I have not seen it, and there hasn't been any attempt, for instance, to call out the chairman. Say, the chairman, we are calling you out because of 1, 2, 3 things. We are calling you out, the Secretary General, because of 1, 2, 3 things. Then that you have been appointed, or the consultation like they do it in ANC, that we are going to appoint a certain minister to in this government, and therefore the party is consulted. I have also not seen that, at least prominently being said out.
Yeah, but we have seen that happen in the. I mean, some of these appointments discussed within the maybe in the caucus or the SEC. That's also possible. But I think the bottom line here is that I think there are a number of things that needs to be looked at, especially when it comes to political party arrangements. Now, one thing which also comes out here is that maybe the political party systems in Africa need also to do more of the soul searching. There is one thing of a political party surviving, and that's of course political scientists will do that. The biggest aspiration of any political party is to win an election and have power. That's the ultimate. But there is also, after you win and you have power, then the dynamics may change unless political parties that have been here for quite some time, like the ANC, and we have seen also that happen in Chama cha Mapinduzi, that you have a problem, but you'll sit down and say, there is a history to how to handle this problem. But some of these younger political parties, political parties without a lot of history on some of the things. Now, ANC over years, they will refer to something like when they are choosing their president, they are saying, now, for you, we are likely to impeach you because we have already impeached others anyway, who have been there. And they are saying, for you, you cannot do this because others had done it, and this has been the result. So even the history alone can give direction to what is happening. But maybe some of the things, history is lacking in some of the political parties. But for me, this clash is healthy, but what needs to be done is to guard the extremes.
Exactly. The point is, you see, having disagreements as brothers does not take away the fact that you are actually brothers.
Sure.
Now, you must reach a point and you act together jointly for the common good. The point we are making here is that it appears to be unfortunate now that the fights within African National Congress are actually not making the party stronger.
Unfortunately.
Yes, we are having gains which are being made by for instance, AFC, I mean the economic this one
Something
of
of
Julius
Malema,
Malema.
yeah.
Yes, the economic liberation kind of EFF, something like that, front. And there are also other parties within the whites minority party.
Whatever that means.
Recently, they brought a petition.
I know.
And they wanted to be to create a separate country.
Yeah,
from South Africa.
Only where the whites will rule themselves.
Stay.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that one is the most stupid proposal that they have come up with. Not that the apartheid was any better, but probably now that they have seen there is a larger country called South Africa where they are not the decision makers, and probably they are also rabid characters like Comrade Julius Marema, who is gaining ground. The fear is that anytime this man takes power, then we may be in a lot of problems, because a man like the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is, although a product of these workers' unions, is also considered to be part of the system of the white man, that is under their pay. But the point really here, and I think which you wanted us to share with our viewers, is that these bickerings within the political parties, what do they speak to the maturity of the respective political parties? And we are having an argument here that there are political parties which are in the name truly political parties. There are also political parties which are lacking on certain fundamentals. We are also making an argument here, like a political party like African National Congress is a true political party, because it is going to make a decision, and the decision is going to affect the sitting government. We are looking at a political party which has got a record of recalling a sitting president, because you come from that political party. We are looking at a political party that has, in the previous regimes provided by the same political party, with the leadership, counseled certain contracts, say no, Minister X, you are intending to sign a contract with a foreign country, and for us as a political party that is providing leadership at this material time, we are not aware. We are looking at political parties like Chama cha Mapinduzi, which faced, for the very first time in its history, the fiercest of the political competition from the
former prime minister.
Former prime minister who joined the opposition, and I think it was too close that even when Dr. Pombe Magufuli, may his soul rest in eternal peace, went through, we forgot about the opposition simply because he was powerful. Even us who were not in Tanzania, we were looking at the performance indicators and we were very proud. So we are saying yes, and of course that is not lost on us. Even when you go down to Chama cha Mapinduzi again, you saw the resignation of the Speaker of Parliament. You saw how they were having difficulty, even when the Constitution said so, of allowing our President, Vice President, who later actually became the President, until the old guards came and said, please, you respect the Constitution. We didn't have the Tanzanian defense forces coming in to create any form of destabilization. So that level of maturity of some of the political parties that we can point out, we have seen if it is an indicator of political maturity, the consistency that has been happening in Botswana, for instance, when the Kamas kind of went off the line, and there was a kind of retribution that was coming from not the Kamas this time around, and how they played it around. So that shows you the level of political maturity, that yes, you can have disagreements, because you remember even ministers would be arrested from the airport, and that was unheard of in the previous regimes as far as Botswana is concerned. We've had the Ikaram here in Zambia as a long time political opponent to even the former, the late Kenneth Kaunda, coming and taking power. So we are saying, therefore, that Africa is not short of democracy, if democracy is going to be looked at from that point of view. We are saying the problem we are having is that there is a neocolonial project, and this project sometimes, quite often actually, interferes with our organic progression. We do not progress at the rate, at the level, and in the manner in which we would have progressed. Like when fire was discovered, during the Stone Age period, and as we were progressing, our development was interfered with, and the person who interfered with it has not stopped. He has got other ways of wanting to see how he can interfere. Like, for instance, we are talking about, I think, I don't know, maybe you will touch it, the genetically modified foods, the GMOs. That is a realization that Africa has got a comparative advantage over the rest of the world, and in terms of agriculture. That if, for instance, 65% of our land here on the African continent is arable, and we can grow virtually everything, and it is organic, then somebody must control what you grow in that soil, which is the seed. The Monsanto, the Seed Data, all these global companies, which are not ours, if they can have the patent rights over the kind of seeds that we are going to have, then they are going to interfere with your comparative advantage of having 65% of your land being arable. Even some of the treacherous statements and scientific discoveries are going to be made to tell you that African soil, biggest percentage, is actually not good for production of a number of crops.
But that notwithstanding, of course, you realize that, like we have always argued here, that sometimes it's not because someone does not want you to progress, but sometimes you're also sitting to cry why you're not progressing. Now, part of the problem in Africa is that when you talk about these advancements having to be Africa-led, it's very possible. We have experts who are working with the international systems. We have now the guy who is in the WHO, who is an African. But you also hear many stories that come out of that house. And this is what someone talked about, that changing a leadership in Africa is not the problem. Because you'll change one leader into another, but you'll still have the same problems that you had with the previous leader, simply because the system has been set. Now, you need to work on the African system. Now, we need to adjust our African settings to be able to fit in the system that will be able to propel the progress we're talking about. We're talking about the World Bank and its sister agencies, the funding agencies. Would they be interested in funding some of the things that will put Africa a better use of the African advantage? Maybe not. We are talking about the food issues. I think next week we are going to commit ourselves to looking at the problems of the agriculture and the food on the continent and the rest of the world. Just recently, when like one said, when elephants are making love, it's the grace to suffer. When there are issues in Russia and Ukraine, why would people have no food?
That is the tragedy. That is the tragedy of Africa. I saw the leader of the African Union with a team going to Russia, and they met.
To beg for food.
They met the president Putin, and all they were asking is that they could have a corridor such that wheat is allowed. You see. And that is where I call African Union not a toothless dog. And some people, like I said previously, have had the guts to call it no dog at all. That leave alone it not being toothless, it's no dog at all. I disagree. Why? When we come up with very big, rather ambitious, but very powerful and daring proposals like the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which purposes to address some of the challenges like the intra-trade that we are talking about, whereby when you look at the Maghreb region, areas of Morocco, the areas of Algeria, they trade more with Europe than they trade with the rest of Africa. Now, the purpose of Africa Continental Free Trade Area part of it is to make sure that they increase the intra-trade amongst the African countries, and I'm glad that all these countries, North Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, they have all now signed and ratified the same, and they are on board. We are saying, therefore, that when we increase that, and we remove, of course, tariff barriers, and then we do away with the issue of multiple currencies, which is a very serious hindrance to doing business, because we lose well over 500 millions.
You don't actually lose that money. You don't lose it. You donate it.
Absolutely, because somebody who appears to be easing your work,
yes,
will find a reason to get that money which you have graciously donated out of your approach to the way you do business, and then he will use it for his own purposes, sure, at your disadvantage. So what we are experiencing here is that, like you said, is the World Bank, for instance, interested in funding some of these major projects that would lift Africa from its current predicament? My answer is no. Why? Because had it been the intention of institutions like the Bretton Woods institutions, World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, to lift Africa from the predicament right from when the institutions came into place, then I think we would be well away from even some of these European countries. Reason being, we are the biggest beneficiaries of the monies within these institutions. But because the money is not meant to benefit us for purposes of lifting us from where we are to another level, we are having a problem. And we're also having a problem at the level of policy. Because the kind of policy, because you are saying, you noted that we seem to have uniform problems on the African continent, regardless of whether the leader X is called democratic or is not called democratic. The reason is simple, that what would differentiate us would be the application of unique indigenous policies for purposes of lifting your masses from certain shackles, socio-economic negative forces, then pushing you to another level. But that will not happen. The macro policies are exact blueprint of the IMF and the World Bank. Because
exactly, and until that time when Africa will have to step back to say, look, let's look at ourselves first before we go knocking on the doors of these people to give us money. In most cases, they're saying, oh no, we are going to give you a soft loan here to be able to. I have an example, an experience. I went through I was at one of the departments of Mulago. And you know, there is now this issue of saying, you know, for us as donor agencies, or we used to call them development partners, I don't know if that name still exists. We are going to give you money or to this tune, but we are not going to give it to you. We are going to give it through an agency that is going to implement that program in your country, and then we will be able to support your efforts through that. But when you saw what happened in Afghanistan and many of these other countries, the Arab world, during those wars, what happens when they send these NGOs to be able to be funded by the Western world to do the work which ordinarily would be government work? First of all, it is like a man walking in your house and saying, I'm going to buy your wife a Christmas dress, but I'm going to give that money directly to the woman, and they will agree on how she can use it. Of course, when a man, you come to the house, you are not going to ask people, how did you use this money? But it's given to your family. In other words, you are partly responsible for that money. But I was at this department, and then power went off in Mulago, and there was a blackout. Then I was talking to a person who was there, said, but you don't have a standby system here, solar generator? No, said we have a generator. I said, but then why can't we have power? Said the generator we have, or which was supplied by some agency, we don't have fuel. He said, why don't you have fuel? That we shall need about 200 liters to start that generator. In other words, what I'm getting here is that you have these projects, you can be given all these projects, but you are not able to make use of them. Because whoever did that did it knowing that it's not going to help you to progress. So in Africa trying to progress, it must come up with its own systems that will help it to progress. But if we are going to rely on someone, and one time we'll have also time to discuss about this issue of investors. Investors cannot be responsible for the development of a country. And we have seen that where you have a number of investors, it's also very dangerous. I think African leaders also need to know. If you are going to have American investors, or you're going to have Italian investors, or you're going to have Chinese investors, wherever these investors are going to come from, trust me, they are going to influence your internal mechanisms of administration.
The moment the investors come into a locality with very weak or non-existent policies, clear policies on how, where, with whom to invest, you are going to have a situation where your economy and your country is taken over. It is also true, and you have talked about it here, that when you expose your country to a group of foreigners who do not have your best interests at heart, then you are creating, that is a recipe for disaster. There are situations where the African continent has had to rely on her own, and all the efforts have been thwarted. I have always, and the viewers will bear me witness, here in UBC had the occasion to say we have had the case of Libya, where the late Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi had developed a unique system, the Revolutionary Committees movement, which was like equivalent of a political party, and also the Green Revolution. Make sure that, yes, you are oil rich, but as a country, we can also venture into agriculture, which actually countries like Saudi Arabia now and Qatar have coped, and they are applying. But because a certain power, the carrier of neocolonialism, is not interested in that, they made sure that they stopped that project, and they stopped it rudely.
Exactly.
Go and see what is happening now in Libya. Therefore, we are aware of the efforts being made in the African Union across the board. We are in the know of what is happening under peace and security, in the know of what is happening in science and innovation, in the know of what is happening in food and nutrition. There is now a new directorate that has been set up. We in the know of research, for instance. But you see, you asked about the funding. The Africa Development Bank, those who put in money are actually not us. So it becomes a problem how we are going to fund the badly needed programs on the African continent to lift us from the shackles of the poverty, when we are not the ones who are determining where money comes from and where it goes. We need to work on that. We have had a very good history in the African Development Bank of Dr. Ikenewe, get the name properly, Nigeria, where he came with very fantastic views and ideas, and he said, look, we must stop, the day we stop looking at agriculture as just a social activity of picking some few food living, and and we purpose to look at it and project it as a business.
Business, yes.
By 2040, the richest country, the richest person, the richest continent will be that one with an edge in agriculture. Is the day he lost his job. Because that is not what the conceptual West, the planners of the future, would want to hear such a man say. And he worried me, because when his accent is a product of some of these of their universities, and this is what the conceptual West does, by the way. They come here and they pick the Mututas of this world, whom they know that are going to be a bit dangerous, quote unquote, dangerous going forward, and they take you to their universities. They reorient you in terms of thinking, and that's why, therefore, the issue of ideology cannot be overlooked. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have. It matters those degrees. What is your type? What is your kind? What is your nature of thinking? How do you think through with those degrees of yours?
Because that thinking does not only stop at the elites, because we also have seen that even the voters in the African countries are looking at that person who is promising them things which are not going to be possible, but because that's what is believed. So even at the leadership level, sometimes you may have people who can join leadership and make some of the things we're talking about, change a few things and here and there. But also this brainwashing does not only stop at the universities and the lecture rooms. Maybe this brainwashing has gone also down. But therefore, the ideological realignment has to go beyond the political ideology into into society, that the African society needs to have certain things, certain aspects of belief and the operation in which we need to survive as a population, as a society. Because if that is not done, then the things which we are talking today have happened and will continue happening. When you look at the social, the elite class. And last time we did here mention that part of Africa's problem is the elite class. Somehow the elite class has let us down from what happens on this country, and we did note that some of the brilliant people in the UN, in the international, even surprisingly, by the way, even at the World Bank, you have Africans who are there, very bright.
A good number of them.
Exactly.
They are there. See, let me tell you, Comrade Mututa, and our dear viewers, the biggest tragedy that has ever happened to man is not the inability of man to read and write. No. The biggest tragedy is the man who can read and write being unable to think and act clearly. That's the biggest. And you see, what happens is that such a man who reads and writes and is presumed to be educated, and yet the thinking is very, very awkward and unclear, has got big masses behind him who believe in him. Now, people believe in you when you actually do not have the clear-cut way of where you are leading them to. That becomes a very big problem, because you see, the tragedy of Africa is such that the leadership becomes a big challenge to all these Balkanized states that we have today, because we are easily bought by those who come with money. For instance, you know the challenges we have. The Melinda Gates programs,
Yes.
they come with thousands of billions of
of
dollars,
dollars, yes.
and they want to make their programs like the GMO go through, and then they will come and buy, including presidents.
Yeah, we've
I
seen.
was at African Union, and one of the high-ranking officers made a very serious statement. He said the problem we have as African Union is that with due respect, our heads of states on the African continent are actually extension workers of the World Bank, IMF, and some of the leading global governments as we know them. Now the preparation which was in the hall, they went silent. A pin could drop and you would hear it.
Exactly.
But she had said it.
Yes, because they know.
This is not a lie.
Yeah.
So the problem we have, therefore, is that we have got a situation whereby we get leaders who are not willing to sacrifice. Leaders who have actually been prompted there. They have been put there by certain forces for purposes of continuing with the flow of these resources in their natural form.
But that was our basic question, as our starting question as we were starting this program this morning, when we said these African leaders now in the US, of course some of them have already left, are they the type of persons you can trust and send them to deliberate for the issues of Africa, or as any other forum of being a head of state, and they are there just in that capacity? Of course, we are not saying they are not doing great work there, but there is that worry. If actually we moved in this state, it's not a state house like the one we have in Uganda, but it's a office of the president, and there were these people who wanted to have a very big contract in that country, and but one of the people who were handlers had told us that I mean, these things can go through, but you need to have a good discussion with the president. Now, for some of these people, they didn't know what it meant to have a good discussion. Now, a good discussion meant that there must be some pronouncement, some promises, some commitments to be made to the person of the president, and it was done. And this president at the end, I mean someone from the team at the end said, but Mr. President, we also have something that we have brought for you, and this is your gift. And I could see the man smiling from one end to the other.
Like a satisfied
and I'm
hyena.
looking at this president, I'm like, are we, I thought someone would say, maybe they will pass through someone to get to the president, but this one was a direct one, and this gift was actually money, in dollars. I can thank God that the president is no longer there, he died. But to me, that was a very big setback.
It was a big statement, and maybe just before you lose your point and I lose mine too here. You see, this is what happens now. When you go to our respective governments and you see this thing called everything refer to the president, you know that the systems have broken down. The structures are just there in a name, but the truth of the matter is that they are not functioning. Because at the end of the day, matters that actually could be concluded by an assistant commissioner are going to be referred to the president. What does that tell you?
But then that means there are two things. Either the president suffering the loneliness of doing all the donkey work for the rest of the departments, or the departments fear doing their work because they have been told not to do so.
We are having
But-
politics of patronage. You see? Politics of patronage whereby certain things, I remember the former executive director of KCCA, in my opinion, she was doing a fantastic job. And I think she was even being praised because for her, if the laws of the council are that this structure is in the reserve, it will go, and the structure will go. Now, a number of these structures actually went. And we are not alone. You remember, you have been to Nairobi. You know what the Kenyan authorities were doing. These ones who put even 28 something storage structures within the corridor. They were being demolished at the cost of the person who put up the structure. So what our big sister here, Jen from C, was doing was the correct thing. She was not who took her to court if she was doing the wrong thing. But politics caught up with her. And I think wisdom, somebody must have whispered in her ears to say, look here, dear sister, I think you are better off throwing in the towel.
Run.
Now, it was not only her. There are a number of well-intentioned members of the society, a number of them, although the number of those who are not well-intentioned outweigh the number of those who are well-intentioned. Those few who are well-intentioned and who are willing to work, either you are not going to be given an opportunity, or if you are given an opportunity, somehow, you, by God's grace, and you go into that position, you are going to be sabotaged. In the same way, the political leadership on the African continent is not managed by the local people. The leadership, political leadership on the African continent is largely controlled by the invisible forces. The invisible forces will bring a president, and the president will bring a cabinet, and the cabinet is going to, of course, have the trickle-down effect where the policies are, of course, influence the kind of parliament. Majority of the parliaments, suffice even to tell you that I think recently, the GMOs which have been defeated in Uganda, defeated in Tanzania, for obvious reasons, since we are not going to go into that debate now, you have reserved it for next week, and the bill was fiercely fought in the Kenyan parliament. But as I talk, the Kenyan government has allowed, I think, the importation. It should be the importation of the GMOs for purposes of offsetting the deficit in food supply that was created by the drought. That's what they said.
Well, you are tickling me to that subject, of course, and we have agreed that it's going to be for next week. But of course, is it true that even that one, I think, to me, is a stupid thing? Kwani, I mean, is it true that Africa doesn't have enough food from where you can import to feed Kenyans?
Certainly that is not true. What is true is that in such cases, the respective leaderships that would allow the Monsanto and Seednet offers would be a trade-off that please, you appear to allow this. When you do and we have an entry, then we are also going to influence the Kenyan government, I mean the leadership in America, to make sure that, and other, of course, jurisprudences, to ignore some of the wrongs that were advanced to you.
Could also be some of the crimes that you have committed, if there are
sometimes that too.
But that, of course, that's now the club we are talking about that is in the US doing all this on behalf of Africa. But I can tell you, when we talk about some of the things, you really feel the pain of where Africa is heading. Not that we don't like some faces, some people, but truly I think there is need to reorient ourselves as the people of this continent. Others, if we don't do that, what is going to happen is that this continent is going to be up for grabs. It's already up for sale anyway, but we African people themselves should be on the lookout, because if this is not done today, tomorrow may be too late. So we need to have a discussion. We need to have a common point. We need to have the common denominator in especially the politics of Africa to see where we are moving and how we are moving there. Otherwise, if we don't do that, we, like one said, we are finished. But we are not yet finished.
Yoro Mumba actually said that if we are not careful, in the next 25 years, Africa, if we continue doing the things that we are doing, in terms of policy, in terms of how we go about businesses, political leadership, and other forms of leaderships, if we continue like this and we do not check ourselves, if we do not go back to the wisdom that was expounded by people like Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and his brothers then, in the next 25 years, we are surely on the brink of recolonization.
How he was beaten in an election when he said that?
Absolutely. He himself was crying forward that he organized well over 420 town hall meetings. He articulated the policy of his constituency very clearly. Everybody seemed to agree with him that what he was saying was the most correct thing. The following, the night before the election time, his opponent came with sacks of money and he distributed it miserably at the polling stations. He was beaten.
Exactly.
He himself confessed. That is the nature of the African politics.
It's very painful. Now, last time as we wind up on this program, someone sent me a question and saying, you talked about the 3 types of idiots in Africa.
Yes.
You didn't talk about, he called him the numbers idiot. And the numbers idiot is what he called the, how is it called?
I remember useful
the useful idiot.
You see, the useful idiot could fall in the category of the tribesman, certainly not a citizen.
No.
Because the citizen is the highest level who appreciates that we are all human beings and you should be treated equally like one would want to be treated himself. He respects the rule of law. He takes a fellow human being as equal partner, but the tribesman is a different thing altogether, who is inward looking, and at all material times it is only his tribe that matters. So the useful idiot can also fall in that group.
And the useful idiot can also be the type of the wired idiot. And the wired idiot doesn't stop only at the micro level. It can even go up to the highest level, where you have someone already wired to do the things that we are talking about here. That if you don't do this, you remember also have this. So you also begin dancing around, and that's also another type of idiot. I think this issue of idiots will one time be discussed at length. But when you look at exactly what happens in on the African continent, as you put your closing remarks to that, do you think that the future holds any prospects?
Yes, I do. I am particularly impressed that the African leaders, generally speaking, have woken up to the reality that was espoused by our forefathers. When you look at the position, for instance, of the political liberation, the economic liberation that was articulated by the Kwame Nkrumah at that time, going into 1963 Organization of African Union. When you look at the breed of the leaders at that time and the kind of perception they had about, for instance, issues to do with agriculture then, and you look at now the creation of institutions like the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, you realize, and the passion with which they have stuffed some of these bodies with very great brains, and the drive with which they are pursuing the attainment of the agenda. You look at the Vision 2063 and the beef they are putting in that skeleton to make sure that they achieve that agenda. Of course, I'm not saying within you will not have some interesting characters inviting Israel, unilaterally giving it the observer status when we know the record of Israel practicing apartheid, equivalent of apartheid against the Palestinians, that those things will not be there. We are even not saying that there are not going to be contradictions at the level of African Union, whereby the permanent members of the Security Council
but Israel
are going
Israel is also saying that the Palestinians also needs to be checked, because that will be
that is now a wider debate. I wish I was not making my concluding remarks, because in all fairness, we know who is supposed to be checked.
I know. Thank you so much, viewer who has been with us since we started with the rain in the morning in Kampala. And I know, of course, many other parts of the country are also experiencing this morning shower, and which is also very good for us to be able to have the food that we are talking about, because other people are living in the desert. They're only just walking on the sun and covering their heads from that dust of the sun. We thank God we're in such a beautiful country. So we thank you for being with us since morning up to now. As we wind up this program, UBC has more interesting programs that will be coming your way after we leave. So don't go away. We encourage you to have your contribution there in most of the programs that go on UBC, so that they can be made to your taste and your liking. We thank you so much, and thank you for the production team that has been with us since morning. Until next Friday, when we shall meet again, we wish you a best of the weekend, and we thank you. Shalom.